welcome back to the AI Trust and Cyber Resiliency Summit. My name is Christophe, Bertrand, Principal Analyst at theCUBE Research. I am joined today by Vince Goveas, who is the Director of Product Management at Capital One Software. Vince, welcome.
Thank you, Christophe. Thank you for having me.
So Vince, just to get us started, could you briefly introduce yourself and tell us about your background and your role at Capital One?
Sure. So I represent Capital One Software, which is the enterprise B2B software arm of Capital One. My career has been deeply rooted in data security, which is a specific focus on data protection. I've spent years navigating that, looking to drive down data and showing value and actually using it to drive business value. My role here currently is to help other organizations solve the same complex data management challenges. Capital One was one of the first large enterprises to go all in on the public cloud. When we started that journey, we quickly realized that the market did not have solutions that could handle the scale of Capital One. And we are talking top 10, bank in terms of processing billions of transactions. So we had to build them ourselves. When we eventually realized we were not alone in facing these, we took that internal secret sauce that we built internally, the tools that run our own data ecosystem, and commercialized them to help other enterprises fast-track their own cloud journey without compromising on control and security.
So let's talk about Capital One Software, because I think many folks may not have heard of the name. Everybody knows Capital One, of course. So tell us more about what it is and what the organization is focused on today.
Absolutely. So at Capital One Software, we are dedicated to providing data management solutions for companies operating in the cloud. We are unique in certain ways because we kind of are considered customer zero for our own products. Our mission is to enable organizations to scale their data capabilities and harness the power of AI. We want to stop security from being that bottleneck that slows down innovation. Capital One Data Board is one such product that we have brought to market, which is an enterprise-grade tokenization solution designed to protect sensitive data at scale without compromising on speed. What's the difference here is, unlike traditional software vendors, we are practitioners first. These tools run hundreds of applications and billions of operations monthly within Capital One's own highly regulated environment.
Right, so this is where it becomes interesting because your experience and expertise really spans billions and billions of transactions and very interesting situations you've had to deal with. And it brings us, I think, to this evolution of the data security landscape, which frankly has been exposed to so many pressures in the past few years. So from your vantage point, how has the data security landscape changed as this AI specifically continues to evolve?
Christophe, this is a great question. And, the convergence of pressure that you allude to, we call that the tsunami effect. Now, we are operating in an era defined by these massive forces, three of them, essentially. One is sophisticated cyber threats. Breaches are becoming more and more frequent. It's and more severe and more devastating for companies. There's regulatory complexity. There's privacy requirements like CCPA, GDPR that are more stricter than ever. Generative AI adoption. Now, I don't have to say that everybody's hopped on the AI bandwagon. Business demand for data has just exponentially exploded. Now, historically, security teams, what they had to do is block access to ensure safety. But what happens is, in this new environment, that causes a massive conflict. For instance, your data science team or marketing team, they want real-time access to drive revenue, right? And they have to wait, for instance, 30 plus days. The shift that we are seeing is, companies want to move from perimeter defense to data-centric security. You can no longer just rely on firewalls anymore. You want to be able to be self-protecting, so it moves through your data pipelines into AI models. That's the evolution.
Right, and we're talking about a lot of data. We're talking about at scale here. So let's talk about data protection a little bit and why, and you were hinting at that, some traditional methods may be falling short. Um, Clearly, many organizations still rely today pretty heavily on masking or redaction or encryption to secure their data. So where do these approaches actually break down in your opinion, and especially if you could put that in a context of AI and maybe some advanced analytics use cases?
Sure. So we at Capital One call it like the data utility crisis, right? When you look at traditional methods like masking or redaction, for example, they were primarily meant for static test development environments, not for dynamic learning AI models. Uh, what when we talk on masking or redaction, what's the problem? The problem is this is irreversible. You mask a credit card, you have destroyed that inherent property of that uh, data. Now, what happens with AI? You cannot train AI to detect fraud patterns if you deleted that fraud data. You end up with a safe data, but it's analytically worthless. Now, let's take another very popular data protection method, which is encryption. Now, the problem with the encryption is yes, it is secure at rest, no question about that. But to use that data, you have to decrypt it. Now, decryption has adverse computational effects. It creates a massive latency when you want to retrieve that data. So if you want to run analytics on millions of rows, decrypting them first brings that system to a crawl, making it impossible for AI workloads.
Okay, let's talk about that a little bit because there's also this notion of tokenization for AI, which apparently is something that, based on our conversation as we were preparing this conversation, is something that you really believe in and are implementing. So let's talk about that because it feels like it's very well suited for enabling AI use cases, and I'm talking about tokenization here. In particular, you mentioned sensitive data, whether it's compliant or just sensitive data from a business standpoint. So how does tokenization really shine compared to the other approaches you've just described, and that are sometimes, like encryption, just not really scalable because of compute or other sort of pressures it puts on infrastructure? Why is tokenization much better?
Christophe, this is a fantastic question. So now let me break it down. There are four strategic pieces which makes tokenization a much better choice in terms of making your data AI ready. The first one is format preservation. Tokenization replaces sensitive data with a non-sensitive placeholder. We call it a token that preserves that format. For instance, an email address still looks like an email address. A zip code is still 5 digits. This means your existing applications and databases don't break. That is huge. Second one is reversibility and utility. We touched upon it, right? Unlike masking, tokenization, it is reversible for authorized systems. You can analyze the tokenized data to find trends. For example, your customer buying patterns or your payment methods, and only detokenize when a specific record you need to send a confirmation email, for instance, right? That's the second part. The third part is you reduce your blast radius. Now, if a bad actor breaches your system and they have your tokenized data, they have nothing but useless placeholders. It does not have real significance unless they mathematically are able to separate it, which is very hard to do. The last one, and which is the most prominent one for this paradigm shift in technology, is using data in use and in a protected form. You're not just, I would say, locking that data away. You are keeping it protected while it's actively being used and used through your AI models and analytics engines to drive business-driven decisions.
Right. So I was joking a few weeks ago with one CEO of a company that focuses on data management, amongst other things, about the fact that the best data is data that's never in the clear. It feels like this is really what you're saying through tokenization. But I'd like to go back to a point you mentioned, which is data in use versus locking it away, which would be data at rest. So as these AI solutions become more and more embedded in decision making, how should leaders think about this idea of protecting data in use versus the old-fashioned way of protecting data at rest? Or should they do both, actually?
So now, Christophe, that's a really great question, and you're alluding to how organizations to allude to best practices in terms of data and use versus data at rest, right? Um, I would the first thing that I would recommend is you shift your mindset to usability. Now we have to, as an organization, stop asking the question on how do I hide this data, and rather start asking, how do I use this safely, right? Security must be an enabler, not a blocker. Now, the second part, and this is the part where most organizations struggle at, is operationalizing at the perimeter. Now, what does that mean? That means is you tokenize data as soon as it enters your environment at the ingestion time. Now, what's the benefit, you would ask? The benefit is this ensures that clear text, anything personally identifiable information, never pollutes your downstream data lake or warehouse. Your analysts, data scientists only see safe tokens. The third one, and this is the most important part, is automated classification and discovery. You can't protect what you don't know you have, right? That's the cardinal rule. Now you use automated school to scan sensitive data and tag them, and you have to do it continuously because data keeps growing in any organization, regardless of the vertical. The fourth one, which is where the industry is headed to, is more of a self-service pattern. You create a security architecture where developers can self-serve this data, which is protected by using tokenization. If you look at traditional method, you have to, file a ticket. You maybe have to wait for 30 plus days before you even get access to that data. That should not happen. And they should be able to access that data immediately to start building, because that's what helps drive innovation and increased revenue.
Right, and this is something that is actually all the more important as we're looking at the quick development of agentic AI frameworks with developers building agents very quickly to support the business. So I think this is very interesting. What it tells me is that while the infrastructure from an AI standpoint is key, data is really where it's all at, and I love that personally. So the thing that got my attention here is also a discussion we had preparing this conversation around research that you have conducted with PwC Research. And this was specifically to test tokenization against multiple real AI use cases, real world use cases. So can you share some of the findings from the research, and to what extent did it reinforce the trade-offs that some enterprises are making today?
Well, this is the best question yet. And yes, you're right. We did collaborate with the PwC to test tokenization against masking and clear text. We focused on two real-world use cases so that the research hinges on real-world examples. I'll touch upon two use cases. First one focused around unstructured data, very focused on predicting heart condition and that the risk associated with it from a patient-provider medical note. That's the first one. The second one is around structured data, where you are predicting patient care utilization from a large CDC health survey, right? Let's start with the first use case. And, this is where things get interesting. Now, with the unstructured data, this is the heart risk use case. Tokenization was at 85% accuracy. and it performed better than data masking, which was still relatively better, 77, but not as quite as tokenization. Now, the clear text baseline was 89%. Now you can say, yeah, the difference wasn't massive because AI could learn from that rich context around that sensitive data. Now things get interesting in the second use case, which is the structured data for patient care utilization. This was where we saw that dramatic difference with respect to masking. Now, with the second use case, masking achieved 50% predictive accuracy compared to the baseline. So data structure loses that significant predictive power. Now, with tokenization, now this is where, believe it or not, it is 99.7% predictive accuracy, all while preserving key features while maintaining that pre-processing strategy. What we realized is tokenization can lead to that better AI predictions and, more importantly, have impactful business outcomes. Now, if you see from this study, it clearly shows that method you choose for data protection isn't just an IT decision anymore. It has a massive impact on the business outcome. And here's the tipping point. The tipping point here is the research proves that when an AI model relies on sensitive fields, like, for instance, age or zip code or transaction history in this case, to make a prediction, masking destroys that model. Tokenization is the only way to keep that model smart and the data safe for utility.
Right, and hang on, you just used a healthcare use case here, but it's Capital One. I thought you were in finance, so is that where the software piece comes in? You really can manage and help across multiple industries?
That's the idea, Christophe, is we do not discriminate industries or verticals. We go where the problem is, right? We want to help solve customer problems and help them derive value and make good business-driven decisions that will drive their strategy to future growth.
Great, and I think that's an important point to make here because you are truly a division of Capital One that looks across industries, again, for commonalities and certainly with your experience in the financial world, it does apply to other verticals. And actually, I'd like to now look maybe at the negative parts of this, which is what are the common pitfalls from an implementation standpoint that you've actually seen, and how do you avoid them?
So I would say is you have to de-risk your AI investment. Now, everybody, if you see here, think of AI as an investment and a barrier to entry. There is a huge cost associated with it. You have to think of tokenization as that insurance policy. AI is expensive to build. We all know that. But if you build a model on mass data, you risk spending millions on that model. That is only, let's say 50% accurate. Tokenization shows you get that ROI on that investment. Now, how do you focus on ROI for production workloads? So now here, the biggest issue here is it's not value in development, it's in production. The fraud model that is, in this, our research with PwC, that was 99.7 accurate, saves that company real money every single day compared to that 50% fraud that they would have spent time on, right? That gap, that's your business case. You saved money, and that's another common pitfall that companies fall into. Now, the third one is strategy. If you look at regulatory landscape today, they get harder and harder. It's not going to get easier, Christophe, right? We've now, through this entire journey, I think we realize that masking is a legacy patch. Tokenization separates that value from data and the risk associated with that data. This allows you to navigate the future regulation without having to rebuild your entire data stack.
Right, this is a very important point. Actually brings me to some practical steps for organizations looking to operationalize tokenization. What are those first few steps they should take from your perspective, from a best practices angle?
So from a best practice perspective, I would say there are three things. Right? The first thing is and this is something that I quote all the time is, don't let your data strategy be defined by the past when your business strategy is focused on the future, right? You are focused on building value for your business, but you rely on the data to make those business-driven decisions. You should not be hampered by that. That's the first part. The second part is you want to protect that data, but you want to be able to protect that in a manner that you want to future-proof yourself so that you can use that data in a safe manner without raising any alarm bells. That's the second part. Now, thinking towards the future. Now, we all know everybody wants to dip their toes in the AI ecosystem. You want to make your business future proof by using AI models, advanced analytics, but you do not want to use masking or encryption that will break or make your data low fidelity. You need real data. This is the part where you want to make the most critical shift, where you stop focusing on exposure or instead focus on reducing that liability. By tokenizing, you separate the value of data from risk, allowing you to finally use the 100% of your data's power safely and securely without compromising on your data's utility.
Right, and we talked about some great ideas that you have and some implementation recommendations you have around, the fact that you have to ingest and tokenize at ingestion, for example, and things like that. And there are so many other things that need to happen at ingest from a security perspective. Now, I'd like to zoom out of tokenization and maybe as we conclude this conversation, ask you for what you want to leave our audience with in terms of maybe 2 or 3 best practices, recommendations when it comes to securing data that you can trust for AI.
Sure. I would say the first and foremost is data usability. Have that mindset to start making your data usable for your business. That's the first one. The second one is make sure you protect as soon as your data enters your organization. So you protect right at the perimeter of your organization. You tokenize that data as it comes in. So once that data is in, all of your downstream data pipelines and applications are not polluted with clear text PII. It makes your data scientists and analysts, uh, future-proofing them for any adverse access to PII data. That's the second one. Third one is you want to be able to discover and classify your data. You want to know what is in your ecosystem so that you can predictably scan and tag that data and use that data continuously for business-driven decisions. The last one is this is where we are moving towards from an ecosystem standpoint is self-service. You want to create an architecture where your developers, your analysts, your data scientists want to be able to self-serve this protected data. Gone are the days where you want to file a ticket, wait for, I would say 30 plus days to get access to that data. You should be able to access that data safely and start building immediately.
Well, thank you very much, Vince, for your time, for these very valuable perspectives. And again, I'm very pleased to discover all the great work you do and you've already done at Capital One Software. So Vince, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me, Christophe.
And to our viewers, please stay tuned for more on AI trust and cyber resiliency. My name is Christophe Bertrand, Principal Analyst at theCUBE Research.